So we only have Slavica Gruborovic, who is a senior solutions architect with Evertz, and he will be discussing the implementations from the vendor side. And then we have Eric Shen, who is the director of broadcast engineering, master control technology at Chorus Entertainment. And Eric will walk us through what the customer side of the implementation was like. So we'll start off with, I'll do a little introduction on Slavica. Slavica is the senior solutions architect for the software-defined video networking solutions at Evertz, with the primary focus on IP and SMPTE 2110 technologies for broadcast and media facilities. In this role, Slavica has worked on architecting, designing, and deploying large-scale systems, incorporating Evertz end-to-end IP-based solutions and platforms. So Mr. Gruborovic has worked with numerous large-scale enterprise customers on their migration to SMPTE 2110 based facilities, with main focus in the area of sports and entertainment. Mr. Gruborovic has received a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from Ryerson University, which, as we all know, is now known as Toronto Metropolitan University. So let's give a big welcome for Slavica.
So as Jamie mentioned, I'll be discussing about implementing a SMPTE 2110 professional media over managed IP networks, but specifically focusing on what we as vendors see the customers going forward and where the SMPTE 2110 is leading us to. So I'll give a small introduction to IP SMPTE 2110, focusing on standards and specifications. Then I'll discuss key components that can make up any SMPTE 2110 facility, but really focusing on network topology architecture, routing/switching, and then orchestration control. Really, I think the orchestration control is really the brain behind your facility. So really going 2110 question. So why considerations and challenges that, well, why comes down to the customer/end user. Considerations would also fall under the customer and end user. And then challenges could be customer, vendors or vendor, and then also system integrator. So really focusing on this why, scalability, formats, and future-proof. I can get that into a group of one, really focusing on going from HD to 3G to UHD and even 8K in the future. So really making sure that I have capabilities of moving from these different standards and formats, but also focusing on different chroma and bitrate. Operational efficiency, I'll discuss a bit on 22-6 and how that led to 2110 and what 2110 allows customers to do. New business models really comes down to what makes most sense from customers. Some customers decide to go 2110 because they really actually need it, where others kind of want to dip their toes into this SMPTE 2110 standard. Considerations, there's always standards and protocols to be considered. So I'll focus on this focus is on SMPTE 2110, but also protocols and different specifications. Network fabric and the orchestration control, I would think those are the key aspects of any kind of design and we discuss in these designs. We get a lot of questions on the network fabric, whether to go CUTS, whether to go EXE or Evertz in this case, whether to go monolithic or leaf and span, etc. Orchestration control really is brain behind your facility. That's where all of your routes are happening. That's where all of the managing of your routes is happening. Multi-viewer, third-party devices, etc. Endpoints really comes down to the edge devices. So these are all the devices that are being connected to your IP core or your network. Those could be cameras, gateways, production switchers, audio consoles, etc. And then they also have to consider whether we go with the single vendor, multi-vendor, and then industry experience of those different vendors, but also industry experience of a system integrator, if there might be one. Now, challenges are being faced in everyday's life, in normal life, but these are the challenges that we face in the broadcast industry as well. These challenges come down to delivery timelines, installation and support, self-defense, education, growth, and sustainability. I'm going to focus on delivery timelines, installation support. It really comes down to the challenges that the customer might face, a vendor or vendors might face, but system integrator. So as soon as you have a challenge under one, there's going to be challenges, kind of domino effect. It's going to affect the other two parties. Self-dependence in education is a key aspect. So making sure that the customer has sufficient amount of knowledge in order for them to do it on their daily basis. So once a system integrator and vendor will leave the site, making sure that the customer can do it on a daily basis. So if there are any issues that arise, they're capable really of fixing these issues, but also making sure that those issues don't repeat potentially. So I'm not going to discuss this too much, but it really comes down to a IP network facility and all the devices, as I mentioned, connecting to a single network switch. You have cameras, you have acquisition, remote feeds, and distribution. So now these could really be coming as compressed streams. So we're talking here about SMPTE 2110, but those could be coming as compressed stream from your downlink, your WAN, or even your distribution. But also you have multi-viewer and processing in this case, and all that is happening in the 2110 world. But before I kind of get into the 2110, I'm going to touch base on the SMPTE 22-6. Really, it's a SDI payload where you have one multicast IP stream. The reason I'm bringing this is the SMPTE 22-6 is still being signed for, but really comes down to what makes most sense from the customer perspective. SMPTE 22-6 makes sense when you're trying to transport signal from a point A to point B without manipulation of that SDI payload within that multicast. As soon as you want to make any changes, it's going to come down to just similarly like the SDI broadcast. SMPTE 22-6 is the same case. If I want to do any manipulation of the audio, I'll need to de-embed, de-encapsulate, do the audio shuffling or different, pushing it to the audio console, and then from there, it's going to go back into the system. So that's where the SMPTE 2110 comes in and makes everybody's life easier. In this case, we have the video, audio, and data on their own dedicated IP multicast streams. So I have a SMPTE 2110-20 for the video, -30 for the audio, and -40 for the data. Now I can easily make routes for any of these different multicast streams without having to touch the other ones. So if I need to do, let's say, up-down cross conversion, I don't need to send the audio. If I need to do, let's say, audio shuffling or swap the audio channels, I'm just sending the audio multicast to that specific audio console or audio dedicated processing item. AMVA, so Advanced Media Workflow Association, and NMOS are key aspect also when it comes down to these SMPTE 2110 systems. So it really focuses on registering discovery of these IP native devices. So these are devices that are talking actually 2110, but also being able to tune the multicast of these IP streams. And all of that comes down to a broadcast controller or orchestration controller that kind of registers these devices and also capable of tuning to the multicast of these IP systems. Right now, really focusing on ISO 4 and ISO 5, and these are the ones that we're seeing more and more. There's also ISO 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm not going to go into much of these, but these are still kind of under specification and not necessarily ratified at this moment. So standard specification, and why are these important? Good question. So efficient workflows. If you remember my slide on the 22-6, it's really hard to manipulate any of those SDI payloads without taking it actually de-encapsulating it, de-embedding it, and then dealing with audio separately. When it comes to the SMPTE 2110, I can deal with this on its own. Interoperability really comes down to multi-vendor facilities, making sure that vendor XYZ can talk to a vendor 1, 2, 3, let's say in this case, and making sure that they're up to the standards and specifications, and making sure that these can talk to each other, hence the customers can be comfortable with the actual system that is going to work. And really troubleshooting. Troubleshooting, if there is no loss, you can't figure out any issues. So that's where the standard specification comes into play. Really figuring out what the issue is and making sure that the issues, if they arise, are they actually up to the standard. But all of that really brings the confidence to the customer, making sure that different vendors, once they deploy the system, it's going to work up to the standards and specifications. So the confidence from the customer, confidence from a system integrator, but also confidence from a vendor perspective, making sure that the system, how it was designed, is actually working to its fullest capabilities. So components of SMPTE 2110 facility, really this is kind of end-to-end Evertz aspect of the IP facility. I'll be focusing on these items. So this is the core switch, in this case in the EXE or NATX. This can also be a COT switch, so I'll get into that in a few slides. And also the orchestration and control layer. So really, again, brain behind your facility. But before I get into the specific core and what makes most sense for a customer, really talking about the topologies, making these different network topologies really monolithic and leaf and spine or aggregation, core aggregation. So in terms of the monolithic, the picture on the left-hand side, it's a single switch and all of the edge devices being connected to that. Your gateways, your cameras, production switchers, graphics. So this, all of these basically connected to a single device. You can have a main and backup, so you can have your red and blue topology. It's cost effective and easy to maintain. But the issue is sometimes, depending on the requirements, depending on the system inputs and outputs, this monolithic switch might not be completely sufficiently used. So let's say I have a camera that's 3G. I might have two outputs from the camera, so two outputs, and then I have a return feed. But that camera might be using a 25 gig link. So really I'm utilizing 6 gig out of that 25. So really I'm wasting 75% of the bandwidth. So that's where leaf and spine or core aggregation comes into the play. So all of the edge devices are being connected to leaves, and then even the devices that have full bandwidth, they can connect to the spines. It can be infinitely expandable. You can start small and grow big. So you can start with a monolithic switch day one, and then kind of move that monolithic switch to be your spine in day two. Again, you can have red and blue network topology for your purpose of redundancy, but it becomes more complex from operational and maintenance perspective. So the system, as you start adding more and more leaves, it can become more complex from that maintenance perspective. So once you add another leaf, you need to reconfigure that and potentially reconfigure the spine, and making sure that that spine has sufficient amount of link or traffic. So core IP switch, which to pick? It doesn't really, from Evertz perspective, we work with either. So of course we work with Evertz switches, but we also work with Cisco and Arista. Really, from a vendor perspective, it should not matter what switch customer picks. It really comes down making sure that the orchestration and your facility can handle these different switches. So I'll get in the orchestration specifically down the line. But when it comes to the picking, it really comes down to what requirements are. What is the expectation day one versus day two? Making sure that the switch that I pick day one can actually grow easily day two without any major uplift. Making sure that I have unlimited bandwidth on that switch. And then also, which I'll show in a few slides, it comes down to the switching and the switching and clean switching. So really, pros of both worlds. Why go COTS, why go Evertz, and why go hybrid? Why go COTS really comes down to purchasing agreements. There might be purchasing agreements or marketing in place where the COTS is going to make more sense than the Evertz approach. IT department familiarity with the specific switches, let's say Cisco Arista, and then not tied to a single vendor. But those last two points can also be advantages or why go Evertz, but the other way around. So you have a single vendor, but you also have a system that might not be tied to IT department. Some customers and some facilities desire to have the specific IT department, but also specific a broadcast separately. And then native clean switching and fast switching. So I'll get into clean switching in a few slides to just to kind of show you what that means from a COTS versus Evertz perspective. And then why go hybrid? Really, you get best of both worlds. So COTS, in terms of COTS, let's say leaf and spine architecture, all of the devices are being connected to the bottom. So all the devices are being connected to leaves, and everything is being uplinked to your spine. But overall, your orchestration on top, in this case, Magnum orchestration control layer, is overlooking the entire system architecture. So it's talking to the endpoint, it's talking to the switches, and it's making sure that there's sufficient bandwidth from, let's say, if I want to send a signal from a SMPTE 2110 gateway and at first leaf, and I want, first leaf and send it to the third leaf and bring it to playout, it's making sure that I have sufficient amount from that leaf one, send it to spine one, and bring it back to the leaf number 3. So again, the orchestration layer is overlooking the entire network topology. And EXC here in this case, or NATEX, really all of the devices are being connected to a single switch. So it brings you back to that monolithic versus leaf and spinal where it makes more sense. In this case, everything is being connected to that single IP network switch. And again, Magnum or orchestration layer is overlooking the control from the control perspective and managing all the routes within that system. And then you have the hybrid. Again, best of both worlds. So you might have devices that are connected to the switch EXC, and then you have devices that are connected to the leaves, where you need fast and deterministic switching. So let's say your camera shading, your production switcher, or clean switching. You might want to consider that connecting it to the EXC. And again, it comes down to orchestration layer, and the orchestration layer being able to overlook the entire facility, so our entire IP networks. So in this case, a hybrid and a mix of an Evertz and a COTS architecture. I was talking about switching mechanism. So when it comes to a COTS edge switching, in order to do clean switching, switching happens at the edge. So if you look at the top picture or top row of the pictures, you have stream B and a stream or a spare bandwidth. Once you send it to the switch, now you have this new signal that's coming in. In order for me to clean switch, the actual switching happens to the edge point or the destination. So really make before break kind of thing. So I need to send both signals, let's say signal B and the new signal, and then switch at the edge. This requires double the bandwidth for every 2 signals that you're sending. So if I need to switch 2 signals, let's say they're 3G, I actually need to send 6 gigs of bandwidth. If they're 12G, I need to send full 25 gig down the link. So this, as more destinations that require clean switching, you get more and more ports that are using for that double bandwidth. In terms of centralized core switching, or in terms of Evertz, the switching actually happens on the switch itself. So hence, you don't need the double the bandwidth of the edge devices. So you fully utilize your switch to the fullest of the capabilities. Again, really comes down to what makes sense for the customer, what customers' requirements are in terms of the port counts, in terms of the switching, and again, it comes down to the clean switching, whether or not that is required. So Magnum OS is really the Evertz complete orchestration, control, and monitoring system. So this is the brain behind the facility that are built by Evertz, whether that be these gateways, multi-layer production switches, whether that be based on Evertz switches, or even COTS switches, in this case, Arista and Cisco. So really it comes down to being able to manage all of the devices, all of the sources, being able to route these sources from a source to destination, managing your multi-layer layouts, and different third-party devices, managing your tally system. And again, full control of the different devices, whether that be Evertz or third-party devices. So a couple of features here, familiar interface. So really when it comes to the control user interface, as a customer, you should not, as a user interface, you should, that user, he or she is not really, does not really care about what's happening behind the scene. All she or he wants to do is source, destination, take. So that really, when it comes to the familiar interface, the control panels that are being used in the IP are really the same ones that we use in the SDI and the same ones that we're using in 22-6. But really it comes down to orchestration layer, and that orchestration layer being able to handle these new standards of 2110. Full control really comes down to full control of all of the devices within the system, whether that be Evertz devices, so through Evertz protocols, or third-party devices. So let's say NMOS, ISO 4, ISO 5, as I mentioned, so discovery and registration, and tuning to those multicasts, or through an API. There might be an API in the system for that specific device, and those devices can be controlled through Magnum interface, either NMOS or API, or through a different protocol that might be supported by both Evertz and that specific device. Managing resources and schedule resources. So managing resources really comes down to, let's say I have a event tonight. So let's say Blue Jays are playing. I need to have 35 up-down cross conversions. So the Magnum as orchestration layer, or orchestration layer in general, is going to manage those resources. So it's going to pull up the resources and it's going to tell you, here you go, use it. Let's say tomorrow there's going to be 5 games for MLB. It requires 75 up-down cross conversion. It's going to pull up and it's going to manage those resources accordingly. But it's not really just specific sport, it's more of what you need on daily basis or per event basis. And then scheduling resources really comes down to what time do I need those resources at. So the game for, let's say, Blue Jays is starting at 7 o'clock. I need to have these resources pulled at 7 o'clock. Again, when it comes to Magnum or in general any orchestration layer, the key point is it should be fabric agnostic. So again, when it comes to the using API for Cisco and Arista, we have deployments for both Cisco and Arista based on this API interface. So in this case, Magnum OS or orchestration layer is talking to all of the edge points, so all of the devices within the system through NMOS, they're IP based, and then it's also talking to all of these switches, so leaf and spine, and it's using API interface to make sure that there's sufficient bandwidth. So it's managing bandwidth and it's managing deterministic switching, which are key aspects when it comes to the broadcast facility. You need that fast and deterministic switching, and the only way you can do it is based on that orchestration layer. So a couple of features, I'm going to mention these, what any orchestration layer should have when it comes to the SMPTE 2110 is really capability of configuring devices. So whether those devices are being configured from API, or in this case, let's say auto device discovery through NMOS and NMOS ISO 4, ISO 5, being able to auto-generate addresses. So all the multicast addresses, so that way the customer or whoever is using the system does not have to sit there for 2-3 hours and fill out the different multicasts. The orchestration layer can auto-generate these different multicast addresses. Also the port name generation, again, it's auto. When it comes to, for example, the Magnum, it's ANVA and JTNM certified. So it's fully capable of supporting NMOS, ISO 4 and ISO 5. Visibility, so it really comes down to being able to visualize this system. When we were in the baseband world or SDI, all you have to do to go from a source to destination is really take the cable and track it down from a source to destination. You can easily see where that source is, where that signal is going through. When it comes to IP, and specifically SMPTE 2110, you have hundreds and thousands of multicast addresses. So it's absolutely impossible to figure out where that source is going through. For example, let's say in 100 gig bandwidth, I can do 32 3Gs. There's absolutely no way of tracking where those sources are going to. So they might be going through gateway, they might be going to a switch, protection switch, etc. So it really comes down to orchestration layer to be able to visualize for a user. So that's where system topology view comes into play. So you can visualize all of your endpoints that are being connected to the switch or your network. Doesn't matter if it's an Evertz switch, doesn't matter if it's Arista or Cisco. It's really visualizing that overview of that facility. Device link status and bandwidth information. Again, I want to know how much bandwidth I have between, let's say, a gateway and a switch. So I have a gateway XYZ. I want to make sure that I have sufficient bandwidth for those sources. So when you need really to graphically visualize those devices and those links in between. Go bar and searching is another key aspect when it comes to visibility. Last thing you want to do is trying to figure out what did I name that camera that's sending the signal from, let's say, here to, let's say, Roger Center. So what I can do is really go to that go bar searching and just type in cam123, and it's going to give me all of the tags that are dedicated to that specific camera. All of the different devices that signal from that camera 123 is going through. And then path view, again, example of camera 123, I can easily pick that camera and it's going to visualize the source that camera is feeding and where it's going through specifically. It's going through a gateway, let's say 5, port 6, it's going into network switch on port 155, and it's going to different devices. So it really comes down to being able to visualize these different IP facilities when it comes to the systems. Scalability really comes down being able to scale the orchestration layer between different facilities. Let's say I have for example, I'm going to take an example of NBC. You might have NBC in New York, you might have NBC in LA, you might have NBC, I'm just going to give you an example here in Toronto. So making sure that you can scale the system as your system grows, whether that be different control rooms or different cities, different geographical areas. But also scalability from a perspective, let's say within that specific IP facility, making sure that my system can grow as my IO grows. So it's no longer just a case of my gateways being able to do, let's say 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 device inputs and outputs. It's no longer a case of my switch can handle this much. It really comes down to orchestration layer. Can my orchestration layer handle 500 flows? Can it handle 2,000 flows? Can it handle 10,000 flows, 50,000 flows? Because last thing you want to do is your system to start breaking as you start adding more inputs and outputs into the system. Flexibility really comes down to different actions based on input. So let's say I have a button here, and then I'm going to press a button. It's going to completely change this view. I have another button that's going to completely change the lighting within the system. And I have another button that's going to completely change the, let's say, building across and how that's operating. So it really comes down being able to do more with less. Now I can really send these reflexes, and those are doing different actions. Scheduling comes down to resource and bandwidth management again, whether that's an Evertz system, whether that's a different vendor system, but overall you need to be able to manage these resources, but also manage the bandwidth, making sure that my 100 gig link is not fully utilized before I start sending the signals down that pipe. Scheduling really comes down to being able to schedule specific events and utilizing those specific resources according to that event's requirements. Just to kind of give you, when it comes down to scalability, project 1 is New York, project 2 is in Miami, Florida. So project 1 is 1,000 configured devices. 3,500 configured links, and 150,000 SMPTE2110 flows. Project Tune, Miami, Florida, 370 configured devices, 2,600 configured ports, and roughly 90,000 SMPTE2110 flows. So we are no longer talking about, let's say, an SDI or SMPTE22-6. You're no longer talking 1-to-1 ratio. So let's say my system was 500 by 500. You more or less had that specific number of multicast addresses in there of flows. We're not talking about tens of and hundreds of thousands of flows. This kind of number is a bit older, so actually both of these systems have actually expanded furthermore without any issues or any concerns from the system perspective. So really it comes down to making sure that the orchestration layer, so not just the devices, the switch, but also orchestration layer can handle this different amount of flows. And then really comes down to SDVN orchestration, monitoring big data analytics, and unifying these together into one umbrella to simplify the workflows, to simplify the configuration and deployment of these different medium to large scale systems. And this is really based on the experiences we have gained over the past couple of years during deployment of 500-600 SDVN device systems. So really, then just pictures too small to kind of fit all of these projects, but these are different projects that are running the 2110. Sorry, it's okay. Questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'll bring you the microphone. So you can just, oh, okay. So you're gonna go to the back, Reese? Reed? Okay, thanks.
Check. Doesn't work. So audio is the hardest part of video. So with the recent acquisition of Studer, how is Evertz changing some of their approaches to 2110 and solving 2110-30 problems with some of the Studer technology that has recently been acquired?
I wish there was a Studer person here. So right now, initially, the Studer, what we were doing is really taking the baseband and
Yeah, the microphones are only feeding the virtual world. The handheld microphones, they're all going out.
Okay. So it really comes down to when we purchased the Studer, we were doing it based on the baseband. So really we were using the baseband IOs and using the Evertz-based IP.
Jamie, he needs that microphone.
Yeah. You said the handheld was only for the virtual world.
Yeah. All of the three handhelds go out to the virtual world.
Oh, got it.
If you don't have a handheld in your hand, nobody out at home can hear it.
Audio. Sorry.
Issues with the audio trash in the university. I need to bring Studer people here to sell the system.
Go ahead, repeat it.
Okay. So when we initially bought the Studer, it was based on baseband audio signals, hitting the audio gateway that's taking the the baseband audio, so analog, MADI, and different types of audio, and converting this to 2110 based on the Evertz audio IP gateway. Recently, we started moving it towards the 2110, so supporting natively 2110-30s. But those would be newer version of the Studer audio consoles. So not necessarily the previous versions, but the newest version of the audio console list. So really, let's say if I was to sell the system with the Studer now, it would be based on a fully IP native 2110-30 system. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
I knew the first question was going to be about audio.
It's so hard.
Absolutely.
So okay, so here then I'll expand on that. Why is audio so hard in the 2110 environment? And what are some of the challenges that you have faced dealing with the synchronization of different audio systems, specifically with some of the baseband integrations that you've done in the past?
So I'm going to touch base on the first part of the question. Really, when it comes to the audio, specifically SMPTE 2110-30, it's really broad. So it kind of goes from 1 channel to 16 channels, right? Well, let's say you have a level A, level B, level C. I'm talking about level A and B, which are kind of mandatory, let's say. So it really goes from 1 channel to 16 channels per multicast. Now, different vendors decided to pick and choose. So what vendor 1 is going to take, oh, I did previously 2 channels, I'm going to take that. Another vendor is going to do 4, another vendor is going to do 8. So some vendors are doing 1 or 2, some vendors are doing fully. So again, as you start doing more and more IP native devices, that issue comes up. So what we do at Evertz, depending on the timeline and the number of devices that are talking different 2110-30, there might be an audio groomer in there. So basically grooming between the different types of multicast on that 2110-30. So let's say grooming between 2 channels per multicast to 4 channels per multicast. And that really depends on what majority of the system is when it comes to the 2110-30. And to answer the second question about the syncing, really comes down to PTP and precision timing protocol, and making sure that all those multicasts, once you encapsulate, are in sync. However, anything that's not in sync, so if you have any wild signals, you need to kind of frame sync prior to entering a encapsulation gateway. If that kind of answers part A and part B.
Okay, Peter, I've got one here from the virtual world. And apologies for the audio. And it's we have a bull-headed monster in this room. Anyway, so from the general question box in the virtual world, what is the best approach for a small to medium-sized production facility to transition to IP? Is it best to 2110 core with edge devices of any flavor, SDI, 2110 NDI, and conversions if needed? Or is a giant leap towards 2110 better? Or hold on to SDI until SDI is dead as the standard and 2110 is fully established?
Well, I love these questions. So really it comes down to, let's say that specific customer is an SDI today, really comes down to what makes most sense for them again. How big is their facility? Of course, it's going to come down to the budget, and the value, and the pricing. Second part of that is also depends on how much of their, let's say, anticipated IP facility, if I may say, is actually IP native. So if they're thinking of everything is SDI and they're just going to encapsulate, I can tell you right now that's going to be quite expensive. So if their intention is to have, let's say, camera, production switcher, graphics, audio console, and buy everything that's IP native, then the 2110 approach is definitely a go. Because right now, what we're seeing is the majority of the cost comes down to the gateways. So if the customer is not intending to start, let's say, day 1, fully IP native or IP native devices, then the SDI approach, the 2110 approach might not make sense for them, depending on their router size. Again, it comes down to their router size, their expectation to grow, because again, day 1, they need to take that hit on the gateways cost. Again, those gateways can be repurposed for something else down the line, but really you taking a hit day 1 in terms of the cost. If that kind of answers the question.
And there's one follow-up. It says, also, what does the future look like for NDI and SDI working together?
To be honest, I haven't dealt much with NDI, but usually we would be doing the NDI to 2110 conversions. So at Evertz, we do actually have those conversions between NDI and 2110. Really, again, it depends on what the NDI devices are and what makes most sense from that perspective. But we're seeing more and more of NDI in different facilities. But again, it comes down to conversion between NDI and 2110, unless that NDI becomes kind of part of 2110 under any future speeds. 2110-60.
We got one more question over here. Sorry about the in-house audio here. So Evertz has become a switch manufacturer kind of by default by, getting their fabric from being a traditional router and becoming a 2110 router. They've effectively become a switch company. Is there plans for Evertz to enter the prosumer market for switches, or is it going to remain in the broadcast space only?
So when it comes to broadcast switches or switches, Evertz has been making this since 2012, 2013. These larger switches. So we have a deployment from 2013 that's for ESPN, based on our generation 1 of EXE. And that was a big 40 RU EXE, and that's still actually running 10 years later or 11 years later, if I'm not mistaken. When it comes to let's say IT-based switches, that's something that I cannot answer really because I'm not sure about any roadmaps on that specific item. But multimedia and broadcast switches, 100%. And we are now in generation 3 of EXE. So to kind of give you an idea, 10, 11 years ago, we had a 40 RU EXE 1.0, and now with the latest one, it's a 9 RU chassis, exactly same bandwidth.
Last call for questions.
I got one more.
No audio questions, please.
No audio questions. Okay, then I'll make this one about IPMX. So there's a new thing, those who will probably attend NAB, et cetera, will see this new acronym called IPMX. So 2110 is to SDI as IPMX is to HDMI. What is Evertz doing to pursue any of that stuff other than gateways? Is it pursuing anything that is native IPMX because of the AMWA 2110, AMWA ISO 4, ISO 5 connection to IPMX? And tie it back to Aspen maybe because Evertz was heavily involved in Aspen. So my question becomes like, what is Evertz doing? Or how does IPMX affect the roadmap starting from where Evertz began with the involvement in Aspen and moving forward into the future?
So that's going to fall kind of under Evertz AV. So we have a completely different department under Evertz that's specifically dealing with stuff like KVM. So like you mentioned, HDMI, USB, so in other words, that IPMX really is 2110, I'm going to call it on steroids, which adds more beyond that 2110 that we know in broadcast. So we do have gateways and even I believe multi-media that's supporting this IPMX. Now it really comes down to IPMX versus 2110 and what the expectations are, right? So if you start mixing IPMX and 2110, there might be some limitation depending on if you're routing from an IPMX source to a 2110 destination or vice versa, depending on what the requirements are. But when it comes to IPMX, that will fall under Evertz AV aspect. So yes, we do have IPMX.
Question for you regarding the deterministic performance side of 2110 and IPMX, in fact, I guess. Obviously, PDP and all this stuff kind of is what we have to count on. But in terms of things you are seeing in live production synchronization, like challenges, things you still feel are not quite right, things that are like red flags, watch out for. Just asking for your thoughts on that.
So here's the thing. A lot of customers, a lot of system integrators think that PTP fixes all your problems. It does fix the problems to some extent, but really PTP is based on timing of multicast IP streams. So if you have wild signals coming in and you encapsulate, so I'm going to use the word really garbage comes in, garbage comes out, in other words. I'm not sure if it's polite, but that's really kind of the aspect there. So once you capture that wild signals, they're going to be wild throughout the system. So the PTP may not fix that item. So there you will have to have a frame sync in 2110 world to kind of try to fix it. It might not be fixed. So the best way of best practice is to kind of take the frame syncing prior to hitting the gateway to make sure that those video and audio and everything is aligned prior to encapsulating, and making sure that all of the streams are fully synced prior to hitting gateway, prior to encapsulating. That way you ensure that all of your multicasts are going to be properly synced, and then PTP is going to keep it synced throughout your 2110 facility. A lot of times what we see is PTP architectures not designed properly, let's say. So when it comes to PTP, we actually design full architecture of PTP. So if you were to look at any of larger systems that we have done, you will have a let's say IP facility. So you'll have all your different devices, but there is going to be on that specific design, there's going to be a completely separate page of just PTP and how PTP gets distributed from your grandmasters to your PTP boundary clocks, and how that gets distributed throughout, let's say, if it's an Evert switch or if it's in a COD switch, and how that gets distributed to the spines and leaves, or let's say an EXC to the edge devices. So really, when it comes to let's say I'm going to talk here about an Evert facility, grandmasters are going to give the PTP to the switch itself, and then the switch is going to distribute that PTP to the edge devices in band. So making sure that you fully are designing these PTP 2110 systems, and making sure that PTP systems are properly architectured and designed. That's.
Yeah, spending 6 hours on it, that was perfect.
I can bring another person from PTP from Everts.
Well, we had one before. All right. Okay, everyone's good? All right. So before you go, just on behalf of the SMPTE team, just wanted to present you with this very cool certificate.
Thank you much.
Certificate of presentation. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now that I know to leave the mic here, let's move on. Next up, we have Eric Shen, Director of Broadcast Engineering, Master Control Technology at Chorus. So, Mr. Shen is a 28-year broadcast technology industry veteran and is currently overseeing engineering initiatives and the technical teams that support global TV and Chorus specialty playout centers, production studios, and post-production facilities. Eric was attracted to filmmaking and TV production in high school. He spent the first half of his career in TV production working as a camera operator, audio engineer, graphic designer, and commercial director after graduating with a broadcast engineering degree. Now he spends most of his time working with technology that helps automate workflows in playout centers. Apart from technology, Eric enjoys a good book accompanied by some good music. Very nice. So let's give a warm welcome to Eric Shen.
Just putting up some notes here. Thanks for the introduction, Jamie, preparing the session for this self-introduction, and you actually did a better job. So what I'm going to talk about, it really is the experience that we learned from implementing a 2110 in our facility, particularly the playout center that we built. And again, the experience and everything that I'm sharing today really is from the mass control and playout perspective. So if you're working on, building a studio, you're using the 2110 for something else, the mileage might vary. So just making sure we put this out here. So today I'm going to talk about the high level of SMPTE 2110 implementation that we did in the course. And we're going to go over some of the benefits and the challenges that we have. And at the end, of course, the Q&A session. Let's get started. So just this is the 2110 kind of implementation that we kind of a very high level. As you see this familiar icons, you probably guess that that's something that to do with everts. So, as we're looking at the our journey on the SDVN, we call it software-defined video network infrastructure. We realized that the 2110 actually breaks the 300 feet of SDI distance for us. So, which is something that's big. It's pretty big was pretty big for us. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to break out, utilize the feature from 2110 and actually building a system across a single broadcast system across two different sites. So what you're looking at here, on the left-hand side, this is the site A, which we built at the Quartz Key, which is the facility at waterfront. And the rectangle on the right is the site we call Barber Green. We call for BG 81 Barber Green. So, and between the sites, we actually utilize dual 100 gig link to share the content, share a lot of the files between the two sites. At this point, we actually kind of in between the two, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 being launching, we actually launched 30 global channel at 81 Barber Green in the fall last year. So this kind of represent on the right-hand side where we have, I'm not going to go to a technical details in there, but just kind of we have a pair of mask clock. We use the ORT server as a playout. We use the lot of gateways there. Yes. And we use the multi-viewer system. And in a view really is the user interface, allow the operator to be able to operate or run a system remotely from the other side, any side actually, anywhere. And then also we use a 10 gig data channel, really carved out a 10 gig out of the 100 gig link, so which allowed us to do file transfers, communication within that 2110 fiber infrastructure here. So on the left-hand side, this is what we're going to be building. We're actually working on the left-hand side of the build. As you can see, we're mirroring the devices on different sites on purpose. So we have a kind of same sets of the device at a Quartz Key, which we're building today. But one thing that we also realized with this SMPTE 2110, we are able to putting that the mask control, ingest, and the QC, which is all the operation on one site. So we don't have any operation personnel at Barber Green, all being running on the Quartz Key side. So that gives us quite a bit benefit with this. So basically, what we're looking at is really a single cloud platform that being built across different sites and work with as a one single cloud. So that actually helps us to realize a lot of efficiency in there. So that's overall how we built. I think that the earlier question that somebody asked when, and we asked you for why are we going to 2110? And I think this is the answer. We can build two different system at two different sites, work as one. So okay, just moving on to the benefits. I'm going to talk about this 5 different areas, very similar to a previous presenter, and we were talking about this scalability. Yeah, so this is something that makes things expand much easier. So whether we add more bandwidth or add more channels, it becomes a matter of bandwidth calculation. Do we have enough bandwidth to launch another channel? Do we have a bandwidth to have a system that go across? Do we have enough bandwidth in between the sites to be able to sustain the amount of work that we're doing? So it's quite simple and make expansion quite easy. The second one is the format agnostic. So we are outputting the full HD today, and we could because of the bandwidth, again going back to bandwidth. If we have sufficient bandwidth, and we can configure our device to start to work output 4K or HDR or 8K in the future. So actually, this is it is a big plus for us. Actually, we are able to, today, I'm going to talk a bit about the limitation later, but today we're still kind of limited by BDUs, and like Rogers, Bell of a world, they still pretty much take the SDI. But if going to the future, I think it just make us much easier to launch a new channel in the new format. And we just go, feeding that 2110 stream to them directly. That's might be a future for us. And expanded the signal range, and as I mentioned it, we are enables the uncompressed video signal travel long distance, right, without degradation. So that's a key for us. So we could simply transmit a signal from one side to the other without any drop. So that's, we still retain the high quality of signal, and we can use anywhere in our platform. That actually provides another opportunity for us. It's a geo redundant. So since we make that system across TDM-SI, actually when we actually design the system, we designed the system with disaster recovery in mind. So the two different sites, even though people are asking why are we putting the two different sites in Toronto, we should put it in another city. But I think it's a showcase we can actually put if we wanted to build another site, we can put anywhere as long as there's fiber infrastructure supported. So that makes a lot more sense for Chorus. And the other benefits of the monitoring and visibility really provides a comprehensive view into the system itself, the stream, whether it's a stream, whether it's a video, audio, ancillary data. And it helps us to maintain and do a troubleshooting. Because just a lot of data that we can see if we wanted to spend time into it, and you can drill pretty deep in those. And then also one benefit is actually help us to improve the ability for engineering to work remotely. This is a big one, and since the pandemics, we want to be able to see more things, handle more things while working at home from home. So that actually pushes the further for us on this. The next one is reduced wiring. So I think it's just because a single fiber can carry a lot more signals. They actually help us to realize that, I just kind of took a picture for our traditional SDI, the back of our SDI router, and looking at how many cables that we put in place just to wire up the router up, versus the picture on the right. And we used a pair of the fiber switch, and we have a same amount of signal going through, and we can wire this router quite simple. There aren't many cables there. It's just a fiber QSFP coming into the IP router, and because of the bandwidth, each QSFP can handle a lot more cable, a lot more signal streams. So it reduces the wiring and the cost of wiring and the work quite a bit. And yeah, coming to And now we can flip this page and it's talking about challenges. So first of all, one is the knowledge shift. The technology shift requires the knowledge shifts for the engineering team. The 2110 is quite a steep learning curve for a lot of people, for the engineering team, and because the whole industry has been doing this for a while, which shifting from the traditional broadcast system and devices into a more IT-centric system. This 2110 is going to push further into that. So, people started looking at, if it's for traditional broadcast engineers looking at cables, SDI, and looking at signal coming out of that, this is very different. We're going to use a very different tools looking at. You're looking at more from the IT person with looking at data, looking at the analysis of those information. This is not easy. This is not an easy transition. And this actually has the same requirement for the vendor as well, for the vendor who support us. I found that not everyone has the whole understanding of what 2110 is and be able to help us more efficiently. So, and I just use it's a paradigm shifts because the understanding the way we do things and looking at things, it's a new concept, terminology is going to replace the old. I just use a very quick example. In a simple SDI DA, we all kind of use in the SDI world, use the DA. We have one signal coming in, and we can duplicate the same signal for multiple times, and we can feed in the downstream devices there. So if we have the signals connected to the router, when we switch between main and backup server, let's say, this incoming to the DA, we're doing this. All those downstream feeds are gonna switch with the DA, right? So you don't have to think it twice, thinking, oh, okay, yeah, that's switched, and everything follows. So the device A there is gonna follow exactly what's coming into that DA, right? The concept changes in the 2110. So with the multicast streams, right? So there's no longer a DA in the system. So what happened was all the devices are subscribed as this incoming stream, right? So let's say the incoming stream before coming into the subscription, which is what we are doing for 2110. So if we are switching between main and backup for this particular stream, but if the device A is still subscribed to, let's say, main server, it's not going to automatically switch it over to the backup server. All the other devices that subscribe to the main server is not going to change automatically. So we actually, in order to do that, we built a subscription. So subscription is that sort of a DA in a sense in the 2110 world. We changed the input to the subscription, and the subscription would decide follow that procedure between main and backup, and actually send the same subscription to downstream devices, making sure they switch at the same time. So that's just an example of the concept change and how you see things and differently. And there are a lot of subscription in the system and doing very similar situation and doing a lot of the similar concept for DA for various different reasons there. So troubleshooting method. Yeah, troubleshooting is going to be a different, as I mentioned, that the knowledge has shifted, and we're looking at different tools, looking at signal, and we're looking at signal paths, looking at multicast streams. I know that we usually, we selected the SDI cable or patch. We can go, if there was issue, we just use a cable to patch that, bypass the device. It's no longer the case. You can't replace a cable. That fiber cable to connect from A to B probably carry hundreds of signals. You no longer be able to do that. So that's a whole change for us and the knowledge base to be able to learn new way of troubleshooting, new way of fixing the issue. So in the 2110. So I'm going to talk a bit about the the kind of issue that we experience when we implement the SDVN, which is the software-defined video network, I think I used the inconsistency as a word. It is something that we have been saying internally, saying, "Oh, I don't know, something changed there." So, I think that there's a lot of benefit that we're talking about earlier about 2110, but it actually pushes the infrastructure further into software-based process from the hardware process, right? So, our good old the cabling, SDI cabling, and the SDI router system, those were hardware-based, right? So we know that we're gonna transmit signal from A to B. It's gonna be there unless this cable had the issue, right? We can trust the cable if we done the cable properly. So for the software-based system, comes with all the software-based system. If you upgrade a system, a software, a computer, a server, we were as a good engineering practice, you always want to try first, making sure that not only fix the issue and also, most importantly, not breaking anything that already exists, right? So that 2110 really is pushing further into the software-based process. So your good old cable, SDI cable no longer exists, right? It's actually defined by software. So that's, and we have seen some consistency. I gave you an example of, when we switch A to B, today, a few days ago, it looks good. A few days later, we might have changed something and in longer switching from A to B properly. Or for instance, because we're implementing 2110, we have, video stream, we have 16 audio streams, we have ancillary data. Sometimes the inconsistency, meaning that, hey, we switch the video over, but not all the audio follow over to switch to that. That's especially this particular destination. And what happened? We knew that we've done it before, and somehow this didn't work. So, and it's probably just part of our learning curve as well. But we actually launched global in the end of August last year. So we have a good 6 months of experience with this, and we've seen kind of inconsistency in various different areas. So that's why I picked the inconsistency in here. Just talk about, as an end user, as a broadcaster, our experience with 2110. Moving over here, we're talking about conversion. And when we talk about conversion, I mean, a lot of conversion. When we talk about lots of conversion, I mean, that's a lot of conversion. So, I think whether we have a studio feed, satellite feed, streaming, news feed, right? So all of those SDI device coming in today, we still have SDI device coming in, feeds coming in. We put the conversion in there, SDI to 2110. And on top of that, what I didn't have here was frame sinks. We're putting frame sinks in front of each SDI at 2110 converters. So that's really ensure that the time code, that the PTP is going to be working properly, making sure we don't have issues for the feed to go into the system. Kind of rule out all the possibility there. So, and at the output side, we have 2110 going to SDI. We do this for the BDU, for Rogers Bell, Shaw of world. We have a transmission tower. We have a tower across the country. We have OTT. We're still feeding OTT with SDI to their platform. Even if we wanted to, look at the signal on my desk, which is, in the mass broadcast monitor, we convert it back to the SDI to look at it. On top of that, we have a lot of devices hanging off of this router pair. So, for example, we have a live CC, a CC encoder, right? Today, there's really not too many choices for ACE@2110 capable devices. So what we have to do, you probably guess it, put into a conversion before and after the CC encoder, put in the conversion before, we put in the conversion after, so that the signal could go in and out the 2110 domain this way. And there are a lot of devices like that, right? But I'm hoping over time, this is today, I think we're talking about this, and over time, I'm hoping more and more 2110 capable device will be available to us, and we can reduce those conversion quite a bit. I'm hoping. So I'm looking at, so there's a lot of devices like this. So, sorry, I probably, when I was making this slide, probably very hungry. I have to put that sandwich there. So it is 2110 as of today, still very much sandwiched in between the SDI. You have the thin slice of 2110 in the middle. When you do this, it's SDI. So it will take some time until we can break that. I'm hoping either side of that domain, SDI domain, can see more of 2110 in our system. So coming back to that same idea, like why don't we even do a 2110, right? So I think if we're, let's say, if we're only looking at one side and we have so many conversion in between, and we probably wouldn't do it because it doesn't make sense. We just have the SDI in, convert it, and going through the process and spit out and have to convert back to SDI. I think the reason we did that was because the side, there's geo redundancy that we can get, and there's a lot of flexibility within the tier. Once the signal is in the 2110 domain, there are a lot of flexibility. You can, they're available anywhere. You can do a lot of things there. Just going back to the question that and people ask a lot and about audio. 6 months in, we haven't broken the audio, video and audio apart because we still bring them together. At this point, we don't have, we're thinking about whether we can feed, for instance, doing live DV. Should we just feed in the audio directly to the live DV booth and getting the audio back to the system and marry that together? Today, because the voice over person need to see the video. So, and then we might as well feed the whole video and audio together into that. And this is going to help us to prevent any, any timing issue between audio and video side. So that's what we did. We haven't really break the stream apart and use a different aspect of those streams. Moving on, in a high cost. As of today, the cost of 2110 capable equipment are still relatively higher than the SDI equivalent. And then also, of course, because if you're looking at, when you do the budget, you're looking at the cost of the 2110 system, you have to think it twice because you also need making sure that you accounted for all the conversion that's needed. SDI today, 2110 today is not going to cover everything that you need to do, and at least from the mass control and playout perspective. That's kind of my experience with the last limited experience with 2110 for the last 6 months. So,
anybody have any questions for Eric? Any questions for Eric? Is it an audio question?
I answered the audio question earlier.
Any question, actually.
Okay. Can you just wait for the mic? That'd be great.
Wait for the audio. Okay, so my question is about site synchronization. Okay, so you said it was 2 geographically located different sites. So my question is about PTP and the challenges you may have encountered in running two different sites with PTP to maintain that deterministic timing. What kind of challenges did you run into by having two different sites completely with two different PTP grandmasters? What kind of advice can you give to broadcasters who want to have two completely geographically different sites?
Good question. So when we're first looking at building two different sites, a facility in two different sites with synchronization with PTP, we were thinking that we were gonna have a lot of issues. But for this particular question, we didn't have PTP issue between the two sites. We actually be able to bring a feed coming from the one side or the other side across, and there was no issue for your particular question. But we did encounter kind of PTP issues in different areas. So, for example, the playout server. So all the video and audio is all based on the PTP. But sometimes, for some reason, the playout server somehow shift from the PTP to another internal clock for some reason, or the incoming feed with the PTP somehow changed configuration of what signals sync, like a playout server that synced up, that actually we present a bit of an issue. And sometimes what we experienced was, hey, why main and backup server play a different, like a few seconds different there? We found out internally, sometimes the internal clock sometimes taken over. And because the internal clock drift, we were having that kind of issue, clock issue, I would say, in our experience. But good question. I was fully expecting to have PTP issue between the two sites, but we didn't.
Wow, thank you. Learned a lot from both presenters. Appreciate your insights, Eric. What do you see as some opportunities, challenges, even use cases for how virtual production will affect current infrastructure, workflow, DevOps workflows, things like that?
Yeah, good question. So what we're looking at is, I think that this is probably go on beyond the 2110. Since the pandemics, we built up a lot of process. 2110 definitely helped us to looking at video, looking at audio in the more granular way. By the way, we connected all the system up, and we actually able to, for instance, our QC operator may be able to work from home, looking at the interface, looking at video. What we built was a lot of the streaming process to help them to look at video. But I think on the just on site, this helps on the one big influence was that of the operation at Korsky, and we don't have people operating at Barber Green, but they don't have to know where the equipment located. They just grab the feed and looking at video as they do as if they were at Korsky. So, and that we may be able to expand that into even further in the future. Did I answer your question?
I got it.
Virtual production VR.
You actually did answer a big part of it, the second part. So Thank you very much. Any specific thoughts or what you've seen in virtual production, with the volume walls and how that's affecting, and thoughts how that'll affect the infrastructure?
Yeah, so, I think we're talking about if it's a virtual environment, we have a lot of virtual environment here. I don't think you're talking about virtual environment. All the system built, we have this whole media system built in virtual environment. But I think that I don't know if there's too much relevant between the 2110, too much correlation between 2110 and the virtual production. In terms of, because you outside, right? And you working remote into the system, I think that's, yeah, I don't think it's too much of, correlation between the two. Yeah.
So Peter, I got one. Oh, I'm going to do the virtual world first. Do you have any native 2110 sources that do not require SDI to 2110 conversion in your system? And then another question is, do you still need an old-fashioned SDI router to support 2110?
Good question. So as today, I wish I can say yes. And so far, we don't have native 2110 stream coming to outside. It's all been converted. And that's why my wish is anyway, I wish that in the future, we can actually have 2110 coming in direct natively, and we can have 2110 stream going out natively. So that's something I'm hoping in the future. And the second part of the question is, sorry, was... Do you have any SDR? Yeah, we are, so we are in between the phases, right? So now in the phase one, we don't have any SDR router. And then we're still using the SDR router today for the SDI system, but as we complete all the phases, I don't see any SDI router, facility. And again, coming through is, what we do is the converter, the gateway conversion between the two.
Hi, Eric, thank you for the explanation. As the IP, as you explained, brings a lot of flexibility for the infrastructure, and allows you to create new flows, etc. Is the operation taking advantage of this to create new workflows that are more automatic in terms of like job schedules, etc., that can streamline some production process or things like that?
So the process that we are building, and we were looking for an automated process quite a bit. A lot of things that we can build into that is the scheduling, as we were looking at earlier, and also have our internal process. I would say that that the in-house build process that drive those automation, drive those fee assignment, drive cost point to make that more automated. Today we're not using. We're using our internal process, which use the API call. So a fee comes in today at 3 p.m. We can actually have API call to say record this, and then we have recorder ready. We can have conversion ready. Whether that fee requires live CC, closed captioning, or whether we need to send the feed going through the live DV booth. We have internal process, really use the API call to arrange, prepare all the feeds in the work order stuff.
So you were very cautious not to mention any technology partners. I'm not going to use the word brands. Could you share some of the technology partners you worked with to accomplish your agenda?
Yeah, it's quite simple. Evertz. Yeah. So in terms of the device, almost 90% are Evertz equipment. The only thing outside of Evertz is we are using is the Prism IP monitor, IP scope for that. So yeah, then our answer is quite simple.
So I have another question. You mentioned about the monitoring system, the troubleshooting, when you need to troubleshooting some faults. And you have an environment that has multi-domains, right? STI, IP core, etc. And you have the full stack of the IP. So you have the IP stuff, the 2110, and the quality of the sets on top of this as well. When the people needs to look for some fault that happened, right? So I remember you mentioned some comprehensive system way that they use to do this. How you correlate the information over the different parts of your system?
Sorry, if I understand correct, how do you correlate the
Yeah,
different
how
parts?
correlate, for example, let's say you have a problem with the channel that's going out on the playout, but it may come in from your satellite feed that is going through all these different conversions and multicasts and then conversion again and all the process. How you correlate or how you troubleshoot these
Yeah.
on the system?
Yeah, good question. The one thing we deployed when we first looking at 2110 system, we actually, instead of using the auto IP generation, we actually use specific generation IPs for specific feeds. So, for example, in the IP ranges is 4 optics, right? So, for example, we use second optics for the channel number. We use the third optics for different devices, and the fourth optics for, of course, all video audio streams. So, that actually makes our job a little easier. The magnet is going to tell you where the source will be, and then you can see that. But, in terms of troubleshooting, we could look at it actually make things more faster. Just by looking at IP, you know that this is coming from one of the channel. And then you point to this device, and this third optics will tell you where the feed's coming from. If we understand that the signal flow, you would know that, hey, this is what's coming from this particular device, let's say CC encoder, right? But we change one digit on the third optics, we know that we can check things before, we can check things after, but without changing the first 2 optics in the IP address. That's how we implement that. It actually makes that troubleshooting a lot more easier, because you're looking at IP address, you go, okay, I know this is where this is coming from, and kind of in an analog way to looking at how we see where that stream is coming from. And they can quickly arrive at the decision that I need to do this. I need to look into this particular one because the upstream streams actually looks good. And that's how I actually use the IP system to help us to get to the issue a little easier. And then we can use all different tools to look at those too. Yeah, Magnet also can help you to see where that stream is coming from. I think the bit of a issue, because we have system on 2 different sites, and sometimes because the magnet have to translate it from 2 different systems, even if it's the same system on both sides, they need to be synced up. They want to make, there's also a link in there to kind of transmit one stream from one side to the other. There may be, because the link in between kind of translated in between, right? So we have 100 gig link in between. When the feed coming through the link, they may call different things, right? Because the change of the change of the naming, but it's still coming through with the same IP. So we can quickly just say, hey, we know this IP. We know that where this is coming from. That's kind of how we kind of help us solve the issue faster.
So Chorus operates almost 40 radio stations. Is there any initiative to centralize any of the master control for those radio stations and radio studios as you've done with television, or are they to remain completely independent, regionalized, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm not from the radio. I'm not sure I'm the best person to talk about the plan. At least from my plan, and from the mass control perspective, we have to complete the phase 2, which is moving all the specialty channel onto it, and we also have a division called QMS, Key Media Services, where we host the third-party playouts. We're going to move that two pieces onto the 2110. From the video, from the broadcast on the TV perspective, we're probably looking at how we can get the native feed, 2110 feed coming from our new studio, right? That this may be the I won't say maybe the next area for us to explore. So once we have all the mass control playout center moved on the 2110, then this may be the next step that we're looking at.
Yeah, so if I can just, the reason Eric keeps looking at me maybe is because I also work at Chorus. So there's been discussions about having some kind of integration with radio eventually, but I'm glad that Eric started to explain about the TV part of it, because I don't want to do a promotion for Chorus, but it's important to understand why the two locations, right? So there's 79 TV channels that come out of Chorus Key, or, you know, so the different phases of conversion to IP, where first of all, we take the 30 conventional ones, which belong to Global, that's the brand, and we put them in another location equipment-wise, right? So that was phase one. Phase two is now we take the remaining 49 channels and we convert them to IP, but they're physically located at Chorus Key. Then the third phase is you now do a true disaster recovery plan so that we can take the 5 or 4 most profitable Global stations, play them out from anywhere, and they're protected. And we do the 12 or 15 most important specialty ones the same exact way. Once we get through all that, we'll get to radio, which doesn't make as much money as television. Right? Today.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Any other
Any
questions?
questions?
All right, so Eric, same for you. Thank you very much for presenting today on behalf of SMPTE.
Thank you.
Here's your certificate presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.